Hi everyone, I'm Shoshana Ort. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and one of the areas that I specialize in is rewiring the anxious brain. And when I originally signed up to do this Instagram Live, I signed up to do the talk about the different pathways for anxiety, and I didn't realize how apropos it was going to be for this time right now. So I'm going to go into practical things that are going on for people and the emotional responses that people are experiencing right now in this talk. So I'm going to start with one scenario, and maybe some people have had this, but imagine you left your house and you're driving in your car, and you're thinking about, did I lock the door? Like, did I actually lock the door, or is the door unlocked? And people who have severe anxiety about this might have to go back to their house and check to see if they actually locked the door or not. Even if they're pretty sure that they did, they're going to keep thinking about whether they actually locked the door or not. And if someone doesn't go back, they might be thinking about all the different things that could be happening if they accidentally left their door unlocked. So they could be thinking that, God forbid, a robber is coming into the house, and how they might be ransacking the house, and how they're going to come back to a house that is in shambles, and their anxiety is going completely out of control when suddenly, like I said, you were in the, let's say you were this person and you're in the car, and suddenly the car in front of you brakes really quickly, and you have to brake on your brakes really quickly to avoid a car crash, and you are sweating and shaking, and you're feeling very, very anxious from that experience. So the two scenarios within the scenario that I just said, within the thinking about whether you left your door locked to your house or not, and the immediate response that you had to have, the quick reaction that you had to have to avoid a car accident, both stem from anxiety, but they stem from two different types of anxiety. And the two different places that the anxiety can stem from are either the cortex or the amygdala. Why is this so important to know? Why is it so important to know that there are two different pathways of anxiety? So people are anxiety disorders are one of the top mental health struggles that people deal with on a daily basis in today's day and age, in the society that we live in. And a lot of people are going around feeling anxious, and they are just saying, like, I'm feeling so anxious, I'm feeling anxious, and I'm doing some of the exercises that the therapist is giving me. And a lot of people are going through CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, which is a wonderful type of therapy for a specific type of anxiety, for cortex-based anxiety. So if someone is doing CBT and using those skills that they are learning, and other skills that are for CBT, which I'll talk about in a little bit, then it's kind of like going to the fridge when you need your car fixed, and going again and again and again, and wondering, why is my car not fixed after so many times of going to the fridge? Like, I just don't understand. I've been putting in so many hours in this fridge and looking at everything that there is to do, and I've been doing everything that I've been told to do, and my car is still broken. Well, obviously, if you're going to your fridge when your car is broken, your car is never going to get fixed, because you're working on a totally different mechanism in the brain. And one of the interesting things, aside from what I was saying before, is that when you are feeling anxiety, the symptoms, the way that you're actually aware of your anxiety is only through the amygdala. Because if people are just feeling their cortex, and it doesn't end up going through the amygdala, which I'll show you a diagram in just a moment, then you don't actually feel the feelings of anxiety, because the amygdala is actually the part in your body that is causing you to feel the anxiety. That's how you are aware that your amygdala is working. So just to explain, just to repeat what I was saying before, is that the reason why it's so important to know where your anxiety stems from, and to know that there are two different pathways that can cause your anxiety, is because if you don't know where your anxiety stems from, you're going to be at a very big disadvantage in trying to change and help your anxiety. And and rewire your brain, which is one of the things that I specialize in. So here's a diagram, a small little diagram of what is happening to you when you go through an anxiety response. So any type of people go through they have sensory information at any given time of the day, and that sensory information, let's just say an example is you're going into a dark room and suddenly you see like a figure. So that sensory information is going to go through the thalamus, and it's either going to go to the cortex to try to figure out what's going on there, and then to the amygdala. And when it hits the amygdala, you're going to have the anxiety response, or your sensory information is going to go. So just as the example, if you're going into a dark room and you see this big figure, if it goes to your cortex and you have a very activated cortex that it's working at its strong, it's going to think, that's a scary person, or a little kid might think, oh my gosh, that's a monster, or something like that. And then that causes it to go to the amygdala, and the amygdala says that's worthy of an anxiety response, and it will start to make your heart thump, or it will start to make you sweat, all of the anxious responses that people get. Or you'll get sensory information, like the car in front of you just stopped rapidly. It goes to the thalamus, and then it goes straight to the amygdala. You don't have time to think. The cortex is the part of your brain that helps you think, and it helps you create logic, and it helps you be creative. It's a very important part of your brain, but it also creates more anxiety for people who are struggling with anxiety disorders or strong senses of anxiety. So someone who is in a car and they have to slam on the brakes, that went to the thalamus and it went straight to the amygdala. So another important thing that is really important to know is that when the anxiety trigger goes from the sensory information goes straight to from the thalamus straight to the amygdala, there's no thinking involved. So these are like in emergency situations. So for example, like if the car in front of you is braking, your thinking brain completely turns off. And if people are trying to do cognitive work when the thinking brain is completely off, it turns off in times of like emergency. It also turns off in times of trauma, because that is completely not helpful when the thinking part of your brain is completely not helpful for you when you're trying to get out of an emergency situation. So for example, let's just say someone is walking in the street and there's a truck coming at them very quickly. So the thinking part of their brain goes completely off, and the amygdala right away responds to help them fight, flight, or freeze, meaning get out of the street quickly, or stay where they are before they hit the place that the truck is. But if, let's just say, the thinking brain was on at that point, the person who might just about to be hit might be in a position where they're just about to be hit by a truck, might be thinking like, oh, what color is the driver's eyes in that truck, that's part of your cortex, that's coming from your cortex, and that is completely not important information when someone is trying to get out of an emergency situation, like being hit by a car. So the body and the brain actually turn that part off to help you survive. And when you're in a place of an emergency or trauma or urgent something that needs you to act very, very quickly, your cortex is completely shut off. So people who are trying to say, let's just rethink the situation, that's a type of like cognitive restructuring and CBT, that doesn't help at all when you're in a difficult situation. So how does this fit in to our daily lives, and how does it fit into what's going on right now? So the cortex, the way that this works is that the cortex's role is that it's the part that makes us human. It enables us to reason, it creates language, and it engages in complicated thinking, such as logic and mathematics. And the amygdala's role is that as you're going about your day, the amygdala is constantly picking up on everything around you. It's picking up on all the senses around you. It's picking up on sounds, sights, and events. And even though you might not be consciously aware of them and focused on them, the amygdala is on the lookout for all of these different things that might indicate potential harm. And if your amygdala detects potential danger, it sets off the fear response, which is an alarm in the body that protects us and prepares us to fight, flight, or freeze. FFF. I don't know if people who are watching this know the responses of the amygdala, but those are the only responses of the amygdala that they know. FFF, and sometimes a fourth is F, which is fight, flight, or freeze, or fawn, which is a little bit more complicated and a little bit more complex, and we're not going to go into that right now because there's not enough time. But if the amygdala detects potential danger, it will set off that fear response so that you can save your life. Now, potential danger can be in a social situation. It could be in a world situation, like a war, just like theoretically. And it could be in a family situation. It could be in a job situation where you think that you might not be able to keep your job. But your amygdala is constantly looking out for these situations and is storing them in your brain. And anytime that you're gonna go into a situation like that again, it will remind you of that situation and it will set off that fear response if it found that it was a scary situation before. So how do you know if you are experiencing cortex-based anxiety or amygdala-based anxiety? So if you find that your thoughts keep turning to ideas or images that increase your anxiety, or that you obsess over doubts, become preoccupied with worries, or get stuck in trying to think of solutions to problems, you're probably experiencing cortex-based anxiety. So from all those examples that I just gave, all of those are thought-based anxieties. If you think about it, like if you're becoming preoccupied with worry, so you're constantly thinking about all these different things that could be happening. So as an example, if let's just say someone is finding themselves constantly thinking about what is going on in Israel and the people that could, and they find that their mind is going to very graphic images and thinking the worst that could possibly be happening, that means that your cortex, that is much more cortex-based anxiety. Now, the way that you know that you're having amygdala-based anxiety is that if you feel like your anxiety has a lot of times no apparent reason or no apparent cause and doesn't necessarily make logical sense. For example, it doesn't necessarily make logical sense. People have specific phobias all the time and they don't know where they got these phobias from. So, for example, a client that I worked with that was very afraid of sitting in large circles of people. And so through the work that we were doing together, we realized that from a time that she was much younger, there was something very, very scary that happened to her when she happened to have been in a circle of people. So what happened was that her amygdala put that into the memory, and unconsciously, every single time she went into a big group of people and was sitting in a circle, that freeze, fight, or flight response came up, and that's why she was so scared of doing that. But sometimes people feel just generalized anxiety, and that is coming from just amygdala-based anxiety. You don't know what the exact reason is, and you are just feeling more on edge and more either irritable or just like more anxious, fearful, like more tense, things like that. And a lot of people are feeling that currently because the entire environment right now the entire world is very uneasy about what's going on right now in Israel, and people don't know what is going to be happening next from this. Like, we are all in the unknown. So because we don't know, and that is a scary feeling for people to be feeling, because we like to be in the know, we like to feel like we're in control, and we like to feel like we are able to survive this. These are all coping mechanisms that we have to be able to keep us alive. And when we feel like those are being taken away from us, that's going to trigger an anxiety response. That is also, I don't know if you want to call it trauma, but it's definitely going to heighten the amygdala's response and the amygdala activation in your brain. So if you are but even if not in times of war, people are feeling a very heightened sense of amygdala because of so many pressures that we have on a constant basis. And these are not necessarily conscious things that we could think about on a daily basis. Like a lot of these things take a lot of work in order to figure out like the underlying cause of these things. But if people who are struggling with just a heightened sense of anxiety and just feeling like anxious on a constant basis or right now and having a hard time falling asleep, that's very understandable. And there are different things that you can do about that. So we're going to talk about that at the end. But I hope that it was clear about the different pathways to anxiety and why it's so important to know where your anxiety is stemming from and what type of anxiety you have. So the amygdala is always, again, on the lookout for anything that might indicate potential harm. And if it detects potential danger, it sets off the fear response, an alarm in the body that protects us by preparing us to freeze, fight, or flight. And the other thing that the amygdala does is it attaches meaning and memories to these perceptions. So two people can go through the same situation, but one will have a negative experience from it and another one will have a positive. And that's because the amygdala, for one person, perceived that as a positive thing. So they will put it into that positive memory in their brain on a sticky note, and for the other person it was a negative experience, so they'll put it into that. So just as an important thing to realize is that even when the cortex is the source of anxious thinking, it's actually the amygdala that causes the physical sensations of anxiety to occur, like a pounding heart, the sweating, the muscle tension, and so on. So the reason why that's actually very important to know is because if people are feeling very, very anxious from their thoughts that are constantly ruminating inside of their heads, there are definitely cortex-based interventions that you can utilize to help that calm down. But you won't be feeling anxious unless your amygdala is triggered. Because again, from this little diagram, it has to go from the cortex to the amygdala in order for you to get this anxiety response. So there might be something going on in your head, but unless the over and over, which might be annoying, but unless there's it's going to the amygdala, and then unless it's going to the amygdala, it's not going to be making you anxious. So someone on one of the questions was asking how you can help with your like ruminating thoughts and things like that. So that is cortex-based anxiety, just for the record. And I can't go into detail about all the different points exactly in these, but the cortex-based interventions are CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, is very, very helpful for cortex-based anxiety. Cognitive restructuring, I can't explain everything that these are right now because we don't have enough time, but modifying interpretations, cognitive diffusion, and coping thoughts to replace the worries that people have. It's also important to realize that for CBT, that you cannot erase a certain thing that's going on in your head. You can only replace. You can only replace it with another thing. So people are constantly when they're trying to stop an anxiety, like an anxious thought, they're like, don't think about that, don't think about that, don't think about that. So a good example that we can give is that, like, let's just say that doesn't work because imagine if I would tell you right now, don't think about the pink elephant. Okay, so I can't see who is thinking about the pink elephant, but I'm assuming that 100% of the people here are thinking about a pink elephant, if that's what I'm telling you not to think about. So the more we focus on what not to think about, the more we're gonna focus on that. So you can't just erase something and say, like, don't think about X, Y, and Z. Don't think about the war, because then everyone's going to think about the war. So what you might want to do in cases that your cortex is being very active right now is one thing that might be helpful is trying to replace it with better thoughts, better images, better different things that might be helpful. And the motto in this is that the survival of the busiest, meaning that the thing that you're going to constantly be repeating to yourself is going to survive in your mind, and that's what's going to be going on in your mind on a constant basis. So so some examples of coping thoughts, by the way, are my anxiety always goes away eventually. I will get through this. No one is ever perfect. It's normal to make mistakes. It's understandable that you're feeling anxious right now with everything that's going on, for example. It doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you or that you are more at risk because you are feeling uneasy or anything like that. And you might want to say, like, this feeling has been here before, and it will hopefully go away and things will pass, and this is understandable that I might be feeling more anxious because there's a lot of stuff going on right now. Now, somebody else asked in one of the questions is, how do you, aside from seeking professional help, how can you help yourself if you have a very activated amygdala? So just to be a little bit more clear on that, and I know we're running out of time, but some people are born with more activated amygdalas, and that doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with them, but they do have to be aware and conscious of that. And if someone has a more activated amygdala, it's very important for them to be taking the steps in order to calm their amygdala. And as funny as this sounds, and as silly as it might sound, that deep breathing might help your amygdala activation tremendously. And just to tell you some of the effects, the positive effects of deep breathing, is that, and because I'm only saying this because a lot of times people find it easier to follow a guideline or something when they know the reason behind it. So when someone's feeling anxious, their amygdala is when someone is feeling amygdala-based anxiety, they're feeling, or just generally anxious, even a panic attack. A panic attack is an overactivation of the amygdala. But when someone takes a deep breath, what they're doing is they're actually pushing on their vagus nerve, which is right behind here. So when you breathe deeply, you open up your diaphragm, you push on your vagus nerve, and when you do that, that actually lowers your blood pressure, your heart rate, and your respiration, and it removes lactate from the blood, and it also increases alpha brain waves, which is associated with the calm alertness, and it releases serotonin, which is a hormone that increases feelings of satisfaction and pleasure. And it also will just help you feel calmer in general. So that's a really big one. And then other short-term interventions that you can use in order to try to help calm your amygdala is regular aerobic exercise. So it's really important for people who are feeling more anxious at this time to be getting aerobic exercise, yoga, and adequate sleep. So that could be a whole nother topic, but getting adequate sleep means getting into a deep REM sleep cycle, and that is actually going to help calm your amygdala tremendously. So that's also why people say that it's so important to exercise, because aside from the fact that it's calming your amygdala down, it also will help you sleep better. And so that's a double, you're killing two birds with one stone, because it's going to have an immediate effect on your amygdala. You cannot talk to your amygdala. It's not a logical part of your brain. But you can treat it by exercising. And people also say, like, make sleep a priority when you're feeling very anxious. And another way that people say that you should be trying to help your anxiety is learn about your specific anxiety. What are your triggers? What are the causes? What are the sources? What pathways is your body going through in order to create these anxieties, so that you can actually get to your specific anxieties and be able to help calm the anxiety down and make it more manageable to get through your day. Now, to just end off, everybody in the world has anxiety to some level. And anxiety is there to protect you. It is to protect us and help it to keep us alive. Without it, we would not know that we weren't allowed to cross the street when a car was coming. For example, we wouldn't smell fear. We wouldn't know that anything was dangerous. It only becomes a problem when it becomes overactivated, and when there has been a lot going on. Trauma activates the amygdala tremendously. And once it gets out of hand and it is overly activated, it makes it very, very difficult to get through the day, and people can be struggling with panic attacks. And I encourage you to reach out for help if you would like more clarification with this or with your specific anxieties, and we should get through this time as easily as possible with the least amount of personal trauma to each of us, and be able to take control of the anxiety and not let it control us. Have a good night.